"You've grown into nothing but a burden, Isabella," her father snapped, voice sharp enough to cut glass. "No man of worth will have you, not with your size, your stubborn tongue, and our debts crushing us. We may as well send you to a convent and be rid of you." The words struck harder than any slap. Isabella Fairfield stood at the head of the dining table, her hands clenching the folds of her simple gown. At 22, she was hardly unmarriageable, but her curvy figure, full hips, rounded waist, a body that did not fit the era's cruel ideal, made her the object of her family's scorn. She had endured whispers, ridicule, and rejection for years, but never before had her parents spoken so plainly of casting her away. Her mother's lips thinned as she added coldly, "Perhaps there is another solution, if only someone would take her off our hands." The room fell silent. The sound of carriage wheels outside broke the stillness. A knock thundered against the door, and moments later the butler announced a visitor, Lord Damien Blackthorne. Gasps escaped the family. The reclusive lord of Raven's Hollow Manor, the man whispered to be wealthy beyond measure, yet cloaked in mystery, now stood in their parlor. Tall, pale, with eyes dark as midnight, he carried an aura that commanded the room. "I have come," Damien said, his gaze settling not on Isabella's parents but on her, "to make a proposal. I will pay your debts in full. But understand this," his voice deepened, rich with authority. "I seek not a transaction, I seek a wife. Isabella Fairfield, the choice is yours. Will you stand with me?" For the first time in her life, someone had given her the power to choose. The Fairfield family sat in stunned silence. Her father's mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled from water, and her mother clutched her pearls as though they might choke her. They had expected to barter Isabella away in desperation, but never had they dreamed a nobleman would step forward, let alone the infamous Lord Blackthorne. "Do you mean it?" her father stammered. "You would? You would truly pay our debts?" Damien did not take his eyes from Isabella. "I do not make bargains lightly. Your debts will be cleared, but understand my proposal is not to you." His voice hardened. "It is to her." The weight of his gaze pressed on Isabella like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. No one had ever addressed her as if her opinion mattered. For years she had been spoken about, dismissed, used as the punchline to cruel jokes, and yet this man, with his somber eyes and strange gravity, seemed to see her not as a burden, not as a pawn, but as a person. Her lips parted. "Why me?" she whispered. For the first time, his expression softened. "Because you carry a strength your family has never recognized. And because I find truth far more compelling than pretense." Her parents erupted, eager to press her into agreement, but Damien lifted one pale hand. "Silence. She will decide for herself." The room held its breath. Isabella's heart pounded so loudly she feared they all could hear it. She thought of the convent her parents had threatened, of endless shame and isolation, and then she thought of this man who, in the space of a single evening, had given her more respect than her family had in a lifetime. "I accept," she said, her voice trembling but clear. A flicker of satisfaction crossed his face, not triumph, but something deeper, almost reverent. He bowed his head. "Then, Miss Fairfield, you are no longer theirs to dismiss. You are mine to cherish." Within a fortnight, the marriage was arranged. It was a quiet ceremony, almost scandalously so, no society ball, no grand celebration. Just Isabella in a gown of ivory silk, standing beside the enigmatic lord who had swept into her life like a storm. Her parents beamed for the fortune secured, but Isabella's thoughts were elsewhere, on the man who held her hand with surprising gentleness, who whispered only, "You are radiant," when others might have mocked. Raven's Hollow Manor rose before her on the day she arrived as his wife. Perched on a cliff overlooking a valley shrouded in mist, its Gothic towers pierced the sky. Yet within its vast halls there was warmth, shelves of ancient books, fires glowing in cavernous hearths, and servants who looked upon Damien with awe rather than fear. That evening, as they dined alone by candlelight, Damien spoke to her not of debts or duties, but of poetry and philosophy, of ideas rather than appearances. When she hesitated, uncertain of her place, he leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. "Your mind is a jewel, Isabella. Do not hide it. Speak." She had never been invited to share her thoughts so freely, and when she did on a passage of Milton on the cruelty of vanity in society, he listened, truly listened, and as the candles burned low, Isabella felt something shift within her. For the first time, she was not simply surviving her family's rejection. She was beginning to live. The days that followed their wedding were unlike anything Isabella had imagined. She had expected formality, perhaps even indifference. Yet in Raven's Hollow Manor, she found something entirely new, a partnership. Damien was unlike any man she had ever known. When they walked the manor grounds, he did not hurry ahead as if she were an afterthought. Instead, he matched his long stride to hers. When they sat in the library, he never mocked her for reading serious works, but asked her opinion, debating philosophy, politics, and theology, late into the night. He seemed fascinated by her thoughts, not merely tolerating them, but drawing them out like a man uncovering treasure. Still, mysteries surrounded him. He never joined her in the gardens by day, preferring the cool of twilight. His skin was pale, almost luminous in the moonlight. The staff, loyal, quiet, devoted, treated him with a kind of reverence that was more than respect. At first, she told herself these were merely eccentricities of a reclusive noble. Yet sometimes, when he turned suddenly, she thought she saw the faintest gleam of something inhuman in his eyes. One evening, after supper, Damien guided her to the music room. A grand piano stood in the corner, polished, though clearly long untouched. "Do you play?" he asked. She blushed. "Poorly. My tutors scolded me for lacking discipline." "Play for me, anyway." Hesitant, she sat and began a simple piece. Her fingers stumbled at first, but when she dared glance up, Damien was watching her, not with criticism, but with something like wonder. "You are magnificent," he said softly. She laughed nervously. "For clumsy hands and missed notes?" "For daring to be yourself," he replied. "You move with a grace you don't even see." The words stole her breath. Her entire life, her body, had been the subject of ridicule, her curves mocked, her figure deemed unfashionable. Yet here was a man who spoke as though every inch of her was beautiful. That night, when she prepared for bed, he lingered at the door of her chamber. "I will not come to you unless you invite me," he said quietly. "Your will is your own." The respect in his tone both comforted and unsettled her. She had expected her wedding night to be one of obligation, perhaps humiliation. Instead, Damien had left her with choice something she had never been granted before. Weeks turned into months, and Isabella's heart began to shift. At dinner, she found herself watching the curve of his mouth, when he smiled faintly at her wit. During their late-night talks, she felt the steady warmth of his presence, a comfort she had never known. She even began to laugh more freely, her voice echoing through the ancient halls. But alongside her growing affection, questions grew. Why did he vanish for hours on end, returning pale and quiet? Why did he sometimes avoid her gaze when candlelight shone too brightly? And why, though he had confessed admiration, did he never take her hand for more than a fleeting moment? One evening, she dared to ask, "Damien, why do you keep part of yourself hidden from me?" He studied her for a long time, his dark eyes unreadable. Then he touched her cheek, his hand cold but steady. "Because what I am may frighten you, and I would rather earn your trust than risk your fear." The admission left her trembling, not with dread, but with anticipation. There was more to this man than anyone knew, something ancient, perhaps dangerous. Yet he treated her with a reverence no mortal man had ever shown. That night, as she lay awake beneath the canopy of her bed, Isabella realized she no longer feared his secrets. She only feared losing the man who had taught her at last what it meant to be seen. Raven's Hollow Manor loomed with its Gothic arches and endless corridors, but to Isabella it soon became more than a fortress of stone. It became a home. Each day revealed new facets of her life with Damien. At first, she moved shyly through the grand halls, her footsteps echoing on the marble floors, but gradually she filled the silence with her presence. She placed fresh flowers on the tables, opened curtains in unused rooms, and invited music into the air. The servants, once reserved, began to smile when she passed, murmuring that the house felt alive again. Damien watched all this quietly, his dark gaze following her as she worked small transformations. One morning, she caught him standing at the threshold of the parlor as she arranged violets in a vase. "You've softened these walls," he murmured. "They've been hard for too long." Her heart quickened at the words, not because they were grand, but because they were spoken as though he truly needed her. Their evenings together grew into rituals. After supper, they walked along the torch-lit gallery. Sometimes he read aloud from ancient volumes, his deep voice resonant in the stillness. Other nights, they played chess by the fire, his eyes gleaming when she dared to challenge his moves. But what touched her most were the small gestures. When she bent to lift a heavy book, his hand was suddenly there, steadying the weight. When she coughed from the chill air, he draped his cloak around her shoulders before she could protest. At meals, he always served her plate first, a courtesy so simple yet so foreign to her life before that it brought an ache to her throat. One evening, as rain lashed against the windows, Isabella attempted to help in the kitchen. The cook, flustered by the mistress's eagerness, allowed her to knead bread. Flour dusted her gown, and her hands worked clumsily, but Damien appeared in the doorway and did not laugh. Instead, he stepped beside her, rolling up his sleeves. "Like this," he said, guiding her hands in the dough with his own. His palms were cool, but his touch lingered, steadying her movements. For a long moment they stood side by side, hands entwined in a task as humble as bread-making, yet Isabella felt her chest tighten with something dangerously close to joy. Later, when the loaves baked, he insisted she take the first slice. "Your labor should be honored," he told her. She smiled, tasting warmth that seemed to melt years of doubt. Despite these tender moments, the mystery of Damien deepened. He never joined her in the sunlight, Instead, he lingered in the shadows until dusk, when his energy seemed to awaken. His appetite at table was modest, and sometimes absent altogether. On certain nights he vanished, leaving her with only a note that he would return by dawn. Isabella noticed, too, the way the servants never questioned his absences, never looked startled when he appeared suddenly, as though from nowhere. She began piecing together the fragments of his life, but she held her tongue, unwilling to break the trust he so carefully nurtured. One night, as they sat before the fire, she confessed her lingering insecurity. "I know I am not what the world deems beautiful," she said softly, eyes fixed on the flames. "All my life I've been reminded that I am too large, too opinionated, too unsuitable. I fear someday you will feel the same." Damien's chair creaked as he leaned toward her. He took her hand, lifting it with a reverence that made her breath catch. "Isabella," he said, his voice low, "the world is blind. They worship fragile illusions. I see you, every curve, every thought, every flame of spirit within you, magnificent." Her throat tightened, tears springing to her eyes. No one had ever spoken of her body without mockery. Yet here he was, declaring her form a marvel, her mind a treasure. That night, as the fire dwindled to embers, Isabella lay awake in her chamber, her heart full. She knew there was a secret yet unspoken between them. She could sense it in the way he lingered near shadows, in the way his touch carried both restraint and yearning. But she also knew this. Whatever truth awaited her, she was no longer afraid. For the first time in her life, she had been given dignity, tenderness, and love, and no secret, however dark, could eclipse that. It happened on a night heavy with storm. The manor's ancient windows rattled in their casements, and thunder rolled like distant drums. Isabella had fallen asleep in the library chair, a book slipping from her hands, when she awoke to silence. Too much silence. The fire had dwindled to embers, and Damien stood at the far end of the room. His back was to her, but his reflection flickered faintly in the tall mirror above the mantel, and what she saw stole her breath, his figure hazy, faint, as though the glass could not wholly catch him. "Damien," she whispered. He turned. For the first time, she saw his eyes glow an unnatural crimson, gleaming like coals. He froze, and then with visible effort the light dimmed, replaced by his usual storm-dark gaze. But the truth could not be unseen. "You were not meant to witness this," he said quietly. His voice was low, almost sorrowful. Her pulse thundered in her ears. "Then tell me the truth. Who are you?" He approached slowly, his movements fluid, predatory, yet restrained. When he knelt before her chair, he looked less like a monster and more like a man stripped bare. "I am not entirely what I seem," he confessed. "I was born 6 centuries ago. War, plague, famine, I survived them all, but not as mortal men do. I was changed. I am sustained by blood, gifted strength and speed beyond nature, and cursed to walk always between night and dawn." Her lips parted, but no scream escaped, only a stunned whisper. "A vampire." He inclined his head, shame shadowing his features. "Yes, and though I could have bound you to me without your will, I swore I would not. I wanted you to choose me, knowing the truth." The storm rattled the windows again, as if urging her to flee. But Isabella remained seated, staring into the face of the man who had treated her with more respect than any human ever had. "You feared I would hate you," she murmured, "but you love me." His composure broke. He gripped the arm of the chair, his voice rough. I do, more than I believed possible. You are the first light I have known in centuries, and if you reject me now, I will not blame you. Better to lose you in truth than keep you in lies. Tears blurred her vision. She thought of her family's cruelty, of society's scorn, of every mocking voice that had told her she was unworthy. And then she thought of this immortal man who had called her magnificent, who had let her choose, who had seen her not as a burden, but as a wonder. She placed her hand against his cold cheek. I do not fear what you are, I fear only losing you. For a moment, silence reigned. Then he bowed his head into her palm, a sound escaping him that was half relief, half reverence. Yet their fragile peace did not go unnoticed. Whispers spread in the nearby village. The young bride never seen in daylight with her husband, the reclusive lord whose lands prospered, though his face never aged. Some muttered gratitude for his quiet generosity, but others feared what they did not understand. It was her family who struck first. The Fairfields, greedy for more than their debts paid, demanded additional coin. When Damien refused, her father raged in town, declaring his daughter had been stolen by a devil. The villagers, already uneasy, began to gather. Isabella, hearing of it from a loyal servant, felt dread coil in her belly. They'll come for us, she told Damien. He stood tall, shadows flickering over his pale features. Let them. I will not surrender you, but you must understand, Isabella, if you stay with me, there may come a day when choice is taken from you. To remain by my side as I am, you would need to become as I am. Her breath caught. The choice loomed before her, a mortal life, brief and fleeting, or eternity in the arms of the man who had taught her true worth. And as the storm outside broke into rain, Isabella knew the greatest conflict of all was not with the villagers, nor with her family's greed. It was the question burning in her own heart. How much was she willing to sacrifice for forever love? They came at midnight, torches bobbing like angry stars in the storm-swept night. Isabella heard the shouts before she saw the glow of fire outside Raven's Hollow Manor. Voices carried across the valley, her father's among them, shrill with greed and venom. Bring her out! Bring out the witch's bride! He's bewitched her! He's no man at all! Isabella's heart thudded painfully. She turned to Damien, who stood at the tall windows, his figure lit by the flare of torches below. His expression was calm, but she felt the tension humming through him like a drawn bowstring. "They will not harm you," he said simply. "But they've come for blood," she whispered. "Yours and mine." He turned, his dark eyes meeting hers. "Then they shall learn the truth that strength is not theirs to claim, and that love is not theirs to tear apart." The great door shuddered under the fists of men. "Open, or we burn it down!" Isabella stepped forward before she could think. "Let me speak to them," she said. Damien's hand shot out, gripping her arm not roughly, but with desperate fear. "If you step out there, they'll devour you with their hate." Her chin lifted. "They've devoured me with it all my life, but tonight I will not hide, not from them, not from anyone." For a moment he held her gaze, then slowly released her. The door creaked open, and Isabella stepped onto the stone steps. The rain slicked her hair to her face, but her voice rang strong over the mob. "You call me a burden, a disgrace, a pawn to sell, yet in this house I have found what none of you ever gave me: dignity, respect, love." The crowd murmured, uneasy. Some sneered, others shifted guiltily. her father spat. Love with a monster? Damien appeared then, tall and unyielding, his presence casting the crowd into silence. His eyes glimmered, faintly crimson in the firelight. Yes, he said, voice low but carrying. A monster, if that is the word you choose. Yet even a monster can love more faithfully than men who sell their daughters for coin. The words struck like thunder. Several villagers lowered their torches, shuffling back. Her father's face purpled with fury. He's bewitched you, Isabella. Come back to your family. She cut him off, her voice sharp as steel. Family does not trade its daughters like cattle. I belong to no one but myself, and I choose him. The mob's fire sputtered in the rain. One by one, villagers began to withdraw, muttering, uneasy, unwilling to face a lord who spoke with the gravity of centuries. In the end, only her father remained, trembling with rage, until even he threw down his torch and stumbled into the night. Isabella turned to Damien, chest heaving. For a heartbeat, she feared she would collapse from the weight of what had just passed. But then his arms were around her, strong, unshakable. "You were braver than I," he murmured. She clung to him. "We were brave together." And as the last torchlight vanished into the dark, Raven's Hollow Manor stood unbroken, its halls no longer a place of secrets, but of defiance and of love. The night fell silent at last. The villagers had scattered, leaving behind only the hiss of torches drowned in the rain. Inside Raven's Hollow Manor, the great hearth blazed once more, chasing the damp from its stone walls. Isabella sat curled in a high-backed chair, Damien kneeling beside her. His cool hand enveloped hers, steady, grounding. She studied his face, its sharp lines, its pale stillness, the faint shadows of a truth most would fear. Yet to her, he was not a terror. He was the man who had given her choice, respect, and love. "You stood against them," he said softly, "against your own blood." "I did," she admitted, tears shimmering in her eyes. "And for the first time, I don't feel ashamed of who I am. I feel free." He bowed his head, pressing her knuckles to his lips with reverence. "You are more courageous than any queen who ever lived." For a long moment they stayed like that, the crackle of the fire their only witness. The storm outside faded into quiet mist, the manor cocooned in peace. Yet unspoken questions lingered between them about the future, about mortality, about the eternity he had hinted at. Isabella knew the choice was hers to make, to remain as she was, mortal and fleeting, or to join him in the endless night. The thought both terrified and thrilled her, but whatever she chose, she would not choose from fear. Her eyes lifted to meet his, and in the glow of the fire she whispered, "Wherever this path leads, I will walk it with you." And though the world beyond their walls might never understand, in that moment Raven's Hollow felt less like a haunted estate and more like home. Stories like Isabella's remind us that true love is not about fitting into the world's expectations. It's about finding someone who sees you as magnificent exactly as you are. I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from right now? Share it in the comments below. And if you still believe love can conquer fear, shame, and even time itself, don't go anywhere. The next story is waiting for you.